Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. We'll continue our discussion on toxic masculinity. If you're just joining us, this is Tuvugana Tuesday. We do this every Tuesday, different topic every Tuesday. And we have three guests that will be helping us unpack this so important topic today. Shadia, and I'm gonna bring her back before we go to our next topic. Is she here? I'm gonna wait for her to join and request to be on. But if you did not watch the first part of this, please go back and see our conversation with Shadia and okay, so you requested with the Turikumu account. Okay, good. With Shadia and Orus, we'll bring him back in this part and continue to unpack this before we bring our next.
Hey,
Hi.
wasn't your account?
Sorry, let me switch back.
Oh no, it's
Is
okay.
it
This
okay?
is fine. This is
Okay.
fine. No,
Okay. I didn't realize. I thought I was in my account.
it doesn't matter. As we have you here to share. Uh, so I wanted to kind of first start with you sort of responding to what Oris said. I know you've already discussed this on the podcast, but do you have any new ideas that came up or questions or I guess comments that you think you can add to what he was saying?
Um, well, I did think of a lot of things. I wasn't, taking notes or anything. I should have,
Uh-huh.
but there's someone who said that we need to think of, in the comments, that we need to think of toxic masculinity not as just men not being able to fit into a mold, but also as the harmful behavior. And I think that, is along the same lines of what I said about, abusing women and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in my conversation with Horus and listening to what you guys were talking about, I feel like there's a lot of, oh, men, we're doing the work. But there isn't very much, we're not leaving room for looking at the actual ways that toxic masculinity is
Affecting.
destroying
Mm-hmm.
lives. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the things we go to are like, yeah, cheating. Like you mentioned cheating earlier.
Mm-hmm.
There's also like rape. Recently, that's been a big topic among Burundians
Mm-hmm.
who are on social media. Rape, gender-based violence, like beating up women, killing them.
Mm-hmm.
There's gaslighting, emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is actually something that we don't even have words for in Burundian culture. We don't even like acknowledge it. We acknowledge
Right.
the physical harm that women go through, but even when you say that as a woman, there's always going to be a man who goes, "What about women who do harm?" And so there's always like this avoidance of
Mm-hmm.
looking at, nobody's saying that women don't do harm. We do, but we're saying that it's men do it at way higher rates than women have ever
Right.
done. And acknowledging your own toxic masculinity is the first step.
Understand. Mm-hmm.
Then, and then I think Oruso is like, oh, I don't, like acknowledging is like, that's as far as he is, acknowledging and stuff. But then you do have, every man has the moral obligation to call out other men, to call it out when they see it, even with a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, those were some of the things that I thought about. Like, let's just not talk about it. Are you there? I think you're frozen.
Oh, you're frozen too. I'm not sure
Oh,
which
you're
whose
back.
end. You're still frozen. I don't know which end it is. Okay, now you're back. Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, but I am really glad you brought out those points because at the end there, Orus was talking about uh, acknowledging women and the women's role, and also being sensitive of gender and things like that.
Mhm.
But I want to pick your brain on uh, what is the role of women in perpetuating toxic masculinity,
Whew,
or
now.
if it exists at all.
Oh yeah, it does. It is very much alive because when men established patriarchal systems, they were like,
Hmm.
here is our role, here is your role as women, and here is how you're going to help us uphold our dominance over you.
Hmm.
And so you always, in every society that's patriarchal, you will always find women. And I think some people call them the foot soldiers of patriarchy. Now on Twitter, they call them pygmies. So they basically are rewarded for their proximity to patriarchy
Hmm.
by saying, "Oh no, men are not all men are bad. Like, look at my dad, look at my brother. Like, I don't think so. I think you're generalizing." So that is also conditioning. I'm not calling this behavior out to like be like terrible women. I'm calling this out as it's just as men are basically brainwashed to be that way, women are also brainwashed not to see it, not to
Mm.
see it as abnormal because that's all we've ever known, that's all
Right.
we've ever seen. So we think that that's how it is. And so the things that were like, personally, the things that I saw growing up that I was taught were wrong were like, don't let a man hit you. Like, that's terrible. But nobody said, don't let a man uh, emotionally abuse you, or don't let a man make more money than you do. Like,
Hmm.
things like that. So you're like, I guess that's my role in society. And so, and for as long as you're not being hit, for as long as you're not being raped, you think that, oh, everything is okay. And so that is one thing. So we end up being, on the sides of men, being like, no, that is not a thing. Toxic masculinity is not a thing.
Right.
Um, but also we perpetuate toxic masculinity by wanting to benefit from like the bad things that like with I talked about this with Horus, and it was
Hmm.
like when you maybe you don't understand toxic masculinity fully, but you know that it's bad, like gender roles and stuff like that. But then when you go out, you still expect the men to do certain things, like pay for dinner. Not that it's wrong. Like my belief, maybe I should start by clarifying. I think this was something that who's also talked about, like what is positive masculinity and what is positive femininity. There is no such a thing. Those things shouldn't even exist.
Right.
Like, we should just aspire to be decent human beings. Like women shouldn't be expecting men to protect them. Like, if you're a woman and you see someone being abused on the street, are you going to stand by? Like, that's the kind of questions that we need to ask ourselves. Like, when you see injustice, you should step up, whether you're a man or a woman.
Right.
When you go out to dinner, are you going to eat that food? Talk about it, not as a gender expectation. Maybe the woman makes more money and maybe she has more money to pay for dinner, and there is no shame there. Maybe the
Hmm.
woman should be paying. Like, so instead of like, or protect, that is something that came up, like protection. Like, men should, my dad had a gun, like, that was the expectation, like men,
Hey,
protect their households.
and has it curious? You just
Mm-hmm.
said something that I think a lot of people are talking about in the comments. The whole idea of women making more money than the men. And to Guma here is asking, because I shouldn't be paying for dinner this whole time. Maybe can you sort of unpack that a little bit? Like what, like men being uncomfortable with women
Women
who
paying,
make more. Is that, I guess, is that a way of perpetuating the whole toxic behavior?
men not paying, or men
Men
being
being
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable with women
Mm-hmm.
having more,
Yeah, that is
making
a
more
trait
than
of
them.
toxic masculinity. Like, literally think about it. If women can be okay with men making more money, why are you so fragile that you are affected by your partner who is a woman
Mm-hmm.
making more money, being smart, why aren't you happy for her? Like, I don't even understand. Like, that is, I think that is the point. Like, masculinity is fragile, and
Mm-hmm.
masculinity, or as we know it, needs to be dismantled for that reason, because it is so touchy, like for things that don't even make sense, like that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
a woman making more money literally doesn't do anything but benefit you in this case, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So yeah, that is a trait of toxic masculinity, men being uncomfortable with women paying for things.
Mm-hmm.
Another trait of toxic masculinity. And then, even though Tugumadori said, I shouldn't have been paying dinner this whole time, that is not the point. The point is, you should have had this conversation with your partner a long time ago
Mm-hmm.
about how, when you go out, how do you split? Maybe you split the bill. Maybe the partner with the most money pays, rather than, okay, women now pay. So when we say let's dismantle toxic masculinity or masculinity in general, we're not saying let women take over. No, we're saying, because I bet if women, had been given the same history as men, the same thing would be happening.
Mm-hmm.
But we're saying let's eliminate the bad, for more equal partnerships and better relationships in general.
Right. But the reason why I was asking you in ways in which women perpetuate toxic masculinity, I think Oris talked about, if let's say his girlfriend wants to bring to make a plate for him, but he wants to make it himself instead, and in a way, let's say that partner sort of um, feels either uncomfortable with that or does not allow for it. But would you say that's sort of, because then you also talked about women wanting to benefit from the positive aspects, but also call out the negatives. Could you talk a little bit more of like how, those small things that lead to actions that perpetuate uh, toxicity?
Talk about them in what sense?
Like perhaps I guess examples instead of in place of like, because to me what
Because it's
I
very theoretical, the way we're
yes,
talking about it.
exactly, and
Yeah.
to me I think it kind of calls out or sort of creates an impasse or sort of like a double-edged sword of thing, for the men, because in that, he is having to sort of hold himself accountable for the
Mm-hmm.
things that he's realizing within himself, but at the same time, he's having to do these certain things that, in a way, could lean towards that toxicity, but it's acceptable, or it's not to that extent. I don't know if you're getting me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for
Hmm.
example, him making himself a plate, we said that could be interpreted as toxic if it's coming from a place of, I'm self-sufficient. I don't need a woman to do
Hmm.
anything for me. So yes, like, it's really hard. I mean, especially when you're a man and you're just coming into it, like, to realize, to figure out what to do and what not to do.
Hmm.
And so to those men, I would say, I don't think it's about getting everything right at once. I think it's about understanding the concepts, or the soul of the issue. And then, as Ohus, like, one thing that Ohus said that I truly appreciated was, talk to women, ask them, like, what is it? Is it toxic if I do this?
Hmm.
If you don't trust one woman, ask many women. Like, what is, because you just can't know what you don't know. So
Right.
it's so, and one thing that we said in the episode was that women, if men are asking in good faith, we're happy to give you feedback. We're gonna be surprised because it's never happened, but we're happy to give you that feedback. So examples, like, you want examples, like, we talked about paying for dinner, we talked about making money. We can even look into our own culture. Things that bug me a lot, in Burundi, that I've seen in some households, like a husband telling his wife ntitujana wambaye ukojewe. Like I mean, technically I can say that to my friends, like dress better, right? Like, hey, you could dress better today. But when it's coming from a man telling you that you're gonna that is packed, you're gonna embarrass me, how you present reflects on me, like things like that you could go on and on about. And then I mean, like, I this is silly, but I was in a relationship where the guy was, we went to a party once, and the guy was like, I thought everything was fine at the party, right? I have a strong personality. I just talk a lot, I guess. And he was like, later on that evening, he was like, I don't appreciate it when we go to parties because these are not his exact words, but you
Yeah.
overshadow me. Basically, you end up taking up too much space. You walk ahead of me when we get there. Like, it's like you're trying to tell everybody that that you wear the pants in this relationship. Like, that is gaslighting. That is an emotional abuse. You know.
Right.
I don't even know if I answered your question, but there
No.
are many examples about like things not to do. Just let your woman be. Just let her shine. What is your problem? But also, not everything is about you in the relationship as a man. Like, not everything is that the woman do is a reflection of who you are. They are their own person. You are your own person. But also, one last thing to highlight, that this doesn't just happen in straight partnerships. This also happens uh, in parent-child relationships. This toxic masculinity affects everybody.
Right. And I think to add to that last one, the last example you were giving, it can also play out in, the sort of the let's say if the woman is in a leadership role and the man is not, the man may feel sort of some sort of, you're not man enough, or starting to feel uh, shame of sorts because of the way other men sort of may perpetuate, toxic masculinity through their language, or how they, um, they analyze that whole relationship of the woman having more power in the relationship. Um, so Shadia, thank you so much again for sharing.
Yeah.
I want to bring somebody else who was not on that podcast, um, who to kind of help us sum this whole thing up, and also to get another perspective. But people who are watching, if you have any dissenting opinion on anything that's being said, please say it.
Someone asked, "Are you saying have no gender roles at all?"
Oh, I didn't see that question.
It's Maniriho one four
Oh,
three. I'm not saying that we shouldn't. Yes, I think the binary gender roles are a problem, and I think that, just like I said, like defending people shouldn't be a male. That's dumb to say that men should be the only ones to defend society. Like, women do it all the time. So I think we need to reevaluate gender roles,
hmm
especially since not everybody is a man or a woman. There are people. It's a spectrum. There are people in between. So I'm
hmm
saying let's reevaluate. Let's maybe not have gender roles, but let's agree as, like, depending on the context, like in your relationship, what is each person's role that is, uh, you know, not rooted in toxic traits or toxic social norms like we were talking about. What does that look like at work? Like, can
hmm
we discuss what men and women and people in between do and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I think it's recognized that, again, to what Orus was saying, is the learning and unlearning has to be happening sort of like simultaneously, but also as a progression over time. And I think through those discussions or realizations is when we kind of begin to discover that that comfortable space or that favorable role where that we would like for these roles gender roles to play. Um, Again, thank you. I might have to bring you back on here because you are saying something, and there's a lot in that. Again, if you haven't listened to Kuma's podcast on this specific issue, please, when you have time, go and watch it. I think it's 1 hour long, and there's a lot more on this. Yes, thank you again, Shadia. Okay, so Abe, if you are here, I'm gonna bring you on. And let's start to sum this whole thing up. Um, Hello, sir.
What's up, bro?
Mugabo kweli kuja kumara mazao by Barcelona.
I know you want to say that. I gotta represent. You know what I mean? I gotta represent. We're still here. How are you?
I'm cool, man.
It's all, man. I'm good, man.
Murako, man. Hiyo mwalimu wabuze matara, man.
Yeah, man. Since yesterday, like around like 2 p.m. yesterday, because of the storm, and we didn't get it back until like today around like 3 p.m. Yeah, so it was bad. It was a bad storm. Like a lot of people, I think there was like trees that even fell on cars. Fortunately for us, like we had a tree fall behind our house, but it didn't really fall on the house. So that was good. Cause like the way it would have fell, it would have like fell on the furnace, and that would have caused a lot.
Right.
It would have been a lot of damage, but fortunately it didn't happen. So we thank God for that. Yeah.
Hey, I'm sorry about that, but turashima Imana ko mukomeye kandi matara yagarutse. You wouldn't have been able to join us, right?
Appreciate it. Of course, I would have been.
Yeah.
It seems to be a constant. Whenever I want to be on this live, something always has to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're good.
So you hold a platform called A True Perspective, and you have a conversation kind of.
Sorry about that.
And it's like I think it was me. Somebody was trying to call me.
Okay.
But so you have these kind of conversations. So far, I know you were watching. So far, what are your reactions and comments to what Shadia and Urus were saying?
They mentioned a lot of good things, but sometimes I guess the perspective I want to take on is sometimes we forget that when we talk about toxic masculinity is we have to understand that we men are actually the victims. You know, we boys. In a way, we're the victims. I think we live in a world where most of the times, like in terms of like I guess toxic, you know, anything gender related is usually always on the women's side. You know, that we forget to shed a light a little bit in terms of like, you know, what society like think that a man should act like or supposed to be, you know? So in this, my take on it would be like, in this perspective, like, you know, we're the victims.
But do you
not just men, but also, you know, growing up boys.
But do you not think that the men are also perpetrators at the same time?
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. You know, because like in terms of like being a victim, you know, it comes from exactly where you're learning it from, and like I think the generalization and the definition of what, you know, of what that comes to be comes from men. You know, because if I were to give like a definition of like toxic masculinity, I would say it's a narrow and a repressive like description of what manhood is. You know, and to me that comes from men themselves in terms of like she mentioned about patriarchal systems and leaderships that have been there, and that's exactly where that, you know, that kind of comes from. So I would say for a fact, you know, men do play a role in it, but it's like it's almost like, let's say you have this generation teach you this, and then the next generation we suffer from it as a
Mhm.
result. You know
See,
what I'm saying?
sorry, not Chiriemo. The problem that I have with, in that sense, saying men are victims is that
Mm-hmm.
it gives some men the uh, idea or the opportunity to justify their action, saying, um, in saying that, oh, I'm a victim of this system that I have no control over, or I'm a victim of this system that I cannot fight or defeat in a way. And that, I think, perpetuates further a toxic masculinity. But
Right.
Naomi here is saying that she thinks you're saying young boys are victims. Um,
Oh, no, no, no. Let me explain myself when I say victim, what I mean by that.
mhm,
Because I do not believe that, in terms of like, that you, when a person goes out, especially men, when you go out and do the wrong things, that is justifiable because you were treated as such. You know what I mean? That's not
mhm,
what I mean by victim. By victim, I mean like when you have someone who whom is raised like as a boy, you being raised like you taught, oh, don't cry. Men are not supposed to cry. You should not do that. Don't express your emotions. Kind of those things, not in the lines of like, not in the lines of like, okay, a person does this and you do such and such actions and it leads to, you being such a bad person, you cause rape and all those things. I'm not advocating towards that. I'm talking about we're victims in terms of like sometimes like how you'll raise a person, especially a guy, and that you as you grow up, you're being taught these things like not only from like just men, but also women. You taught like I'm sure you've heard this term like,
mhm,
oh, you're a boy, you should not be crying, you should hold
mhm,
yourself. You know what I mean? Like that's toxic. You know what I mean? We should be telling our boys, our young boys, to express themselves. You know what I mean? In order to raise, a good young men, a good men to, for the future. That's
mhm,
that's what I mean by a victim. I don't mean by victim to condone any behaviors that a person does that are negative.
mhm.
Please don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, so don't get me
So
wrong.
in that sense, then I'm gonna bring out something Shadia said. She said that
Hmm.
within the social construct, there is the idea of
Right.
choices that the men make that
Hmm.
sort of begins or at least adds to the perpetuation. So in that so if they are victims, where do choices come in that narrative?
I think as a person, we're all as we go up, I don't think anybody ever has to teach us what's right and wrong. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like the example that I always like to give is this: no one ever taught you that it was wrong to cuss at your mom or to like say certain things to your mom. You know what I mean? You kind of grow up knowing those things. So in terms of like right and wrong, you know, I think you can like how do I say this? And this might be harsh to say, but like right and wrong is not so much taught. It's more of like values and the things. Like if you see someone slapping somebody, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like slapping someone is not right. So it's not something that you necessarily have to be taught. You know it and you can feel it.
Hmm.
But if you choose to ignore it, you know, then that becomes something else. I don't know if I'm like answering your question, but I don't think where does it become right and wrong? I think it becomes right and wrong. How do I say this?
I'm not asking in terms of like right or wrong, but the choices that you
Hmm.
make over time and in creating
Right.
that construct, or
Yeah. To me, I think.
sorry, because another way you also get influenced by by the things around you and the
Hmm.
environment within which you grow.
Hmm. I like to believe that sometimes like people we it's very hard to determine like an individual because who we become is based all upon the influences that we have in our lives.
Hmm.
The person that we become is based on like what my mother has taught me, what my father has taught me, what I've seen from other people. So being an individual becomes a very difficult thing. But in those terms, you yourself as a person, you have to determine what is right and what is wrong, which can be difficult. I have the fortune in terms of like how I see toxic masculinity. Like for myself, I have the fortune of like and a very kind of specific perspective on it because I was raised by women. I'm the only guy in my family, literally, only boy. I have 6 sisters, and I am the only boy. And it's also a fun fact that my father as well was the only boy in his family.
I actually was going to bring that up. Like, go ahead.
Yeah.
Continue.
So with that being said, it's like I've been fortunate enough to be around women that I know exactly what it is to like how I guess how to talk to a woman properly in terms of like just being respectful. But I've also seen where like my male counterparts where like me being friendly or like having friendships with women has come into under scrutiny. Like, man, you got so many female friends, like whatever this and this, like and it is like there's nothing wrong with like because like sometimes like even guys will look down upon you and say things like, man, how can you have so many friends and you're not dating all of them? Like, what's wrong with you? And it's like,
Right.
not every female I have to date. I can be friends with. And as a guy, I'm allowed to have female friends. I shouldn't only have female friends as, looking for something that has to be sexual or anything like that, So I think within our culture, as a Urumulungu, you get scrutinized for that. Like, oh man, so it's like, no, women are, they're powerful. And there's no reason why I shouldn't want to, associate myself with women apart from like wanting something from them that is sexual or like in that sort of context.
Yeah.
So I think that's another way to look at it too.
So, staying on that, the fact that you grew up around women, do you think one has to be born and gets to grow up around women for them to sort of start understanding and being aware of toxic masculinity, or do you think you have the opposite effect where maybe you grow up not having any of the toxic traits? I'm not sure if that's exactly true, but I'm trying to pick up the idea because if let's say let's say in some ideal world, all there are women and there's let's say one or two guys. Do you think
Right.
you end up being aware of toxic masculinity, or is it something? Because in my opinion, I think that regardless of who you grow up around, you experience it as a young person or as you grow.
Cool.
But I'm trying
Cool.
to ask you, since you've had that experience.
Okay. I would answer this question kind of like how the lady who was here before answered it. I think it's all about we should all be growing up basically with the human decency to treat people well. It shouldn't matter who you grow up around. You know what I
Right.
mean? Whether you grow up with women or whether you grow up around men, just have the decency to treat someone with respect. That's it. I like, and the reason why I say that is because sometimes we like to make things, there's this saying like, not all things are black and white, but I like to believe that things are black and white until we make them gray. What I mean by that is because like, I truly believe that if you were raised by a man, right? Let's just say you have no women influence in your life. You're raised by a man. I believe that man can teach you to be a decent human being who has respect. The same way, if you're raised by a woman or just women in general, they can teach you how to be a man and be a respectful, enough person to be in society.
In real life,
So I
it
don't
does.
think So I don't think one over the other really makes a difference. It's all about if a person is actually teaching you to be a good person. If you're being raised in an environment where you can actually grow up with respect. I think that's what it mostly has to do with.
Right. So I kind of in that sense, then it makes me want to ask you the question that I asked Arus. Um, do you feel like in that sense, as somebody who understands and is aware of these toxic traits, you have a moral obligation to I want to use correct other men, but to uh, not only live out those positive traits, but also
Right.
uh, I'm gonna use the same metaphor I use with others, like shine the light, in terms of like this. Hey, I've discovered this, traits that are not toxic when it comes to how we interact with our counterparts.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Do I feel morally obligated? I think I'm gonna say this. Mukirundi, like in Africa, we have this saying that a child isn't only raised by their parents, but they're also raised by the society around them.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say
It
that.
takes a village.
And
Mm-hmm.
of course, it takes a village to raise, to raise a child. And the
Uh-huh.
reason why I say that is because, like, I think that's one thing that you said that I wouldn't say I'm not saying that what he's saying is wrong because to each his own. But I would say that I feel like I am obligated, because I'm a nephew, but I'm also an uncle. My two nephews, they grew up with me. They live with me right now and my parents. And I feel like it's my obligation to teach them in terms of like how to treat a lady,
Mm-hmm.
how to talk to, not only that, but how to just be a decent human being. And if I know that knowledge and the way it should be, that right there, the fact that I know what is right and wrong, the fact that I understand the issue makes me obligated to actually want to share that and to teach them that, to make sure that they know that. So in return, as they grow, they'll do the same thing to their friends, but also anyone else whom they encounter.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel morally obligated to do that by all means. I don't see a reason why I should know that. Of course, I should, add it to myself and hold myself accountable all the time to act, accordingly to that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also my right, it's my obligation that I feel like to me to make sure that everyone, whomever I encounter,
Right.
especially Warundi,
Yeah.
we have this like, especially Mubahun. You see a guy doing something like, especially saying certain, being an alpha male, I see sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
And like this guy is like literally, I've seen this before in action. And you were actually with me in Virginia not so long ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember the encounter with the MC that was at the wedding.
Uh-huh.
That occurred, because I
I remember
saw
that incident.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, he went on this guy. He was basically being rude to a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And that girl happened to be my friend, but I'm like, you can't treat a lady like that. You can't even talk to a female like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But he felt the sense of this alpha male that he has the right to say whatever he wanted to say.
Uh-huh.
And for me, it was not sitting well with me because I had seen him do it the night before.
Right.
So in that moment, I was like, no. Somebody had to say something, and I said it to him. And you saw his reaction. He was like, nah. But so I do feel a sense of an obligation to share and to like try and make sure that we, as young men, we grow up with respect to women and also to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Naomi here is saying, he says, throw you under the bus. And I think Tuguma earlier was saying, if call out that, other men have to check us when they see such behavior. So in terms of, so you talked a little about your siblings. So let's say in terms of friends or other people in the community, and going back to the idea Oris was talking about in terms of like protecting or putting up a front to protect yourself.
Right.
What sort of, I want to kind of discuss the conflicts that come within there, because at that point you have sort of this obligation to uphold your own values and the traits that you've acknowledged, but at the same time there are other interplays that that come in. So in terms of like throwing people under the bus, and as an obligation, if let's say if that MC was your best friend, would you have
Right.
done the same thing? And what is the correct way to go about that? Or not even the correct way, but what is the like? How do you go about that?
I think using the word throwing people under the bus is a bit negative. I guess I would say. I guess it kind of creates that kind of norm that we shouldn't like say that. But if that MC was my best friend or was someone whom I was close to, I guess I could say first, like by being confident, I would have said like, I would probably not be friends with the person like that in the first place. But you never know people. Sometimes things happen, and I think if it was someone whom I was close to, by all means, I would probably have done the same thing. To be honest, because like it's just for me the way I am, the person, and I can't expect everybody to be like me. I have to know that for a fact. When you approach people, I can't expect that person is going to be like this or they'll understand where I'm coming from. You have to actually have the conversations and actually understand and be respectful enough that not everyone is going to act like you or have the same values as you do.
Right.
But I think that's where talking about it helps. You know what I mean? So if that would have been someone whom I knew, I think I would have been probably even more disappointed. And I would definitely would have loved to have the conversation. I would approach them. I would have the conversation and said, "Hey, come on, man. We gotta do better than that."
Right.
Because the one thing that I've seen, especially in Kuniza, I've seen it. Watch about Burundi. It's sometimes a lot of I feel like a lot of guys, especially in Burundi, have given off this impression towards Abakobwa Barundi that we like our Hungu Barundi, we're all in the same category. We're the same. We act the same, and we don't know how to treat a lady. At least that's my experience from what I've seen or how I hear they speak, and sometimes they'll speak to me and not to cool myself and whatever, and they'll hear my views and they're like, "Are you sure you're Burundian?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm Burundi, of course." And it's like I get surprised because I'm like,
as if it's not Burundian for you to
it's not Burundian enough for me to act as such. You know what I mean? Yes, Burundi, and I have these views and I have these values, but this is where I think we've digged that hole for ourselves, But I can't blame for a girl asking me that because that's exactly what they have seen in terms of So then when you see a girl meet someone let's say yourself, or someone else, oh my God, and it's yeah, this should be the image of Burundian guys that we're putting out there or African guys in general. But sometimes when you have Umuhumugusa representing something or a few people, the message that sometimes isn't. So you can't really be surprised when people ask you such questions. Yeah.
So I once had a discussion with a friend of mine, and in terms of this topic, they said that we have to acknowledge or to accept that toxic masculinity exists and that it existed before and will always exist. And and to them, going back to the choices, is you just have to choose and know who you can call close friends, or you can call people that you interact with, but keeping in mind that those things exist. And so I kind of want to unpack the idea of people who boast in their toxicity, or men who boast, knowing that their behavior is toxic, but they still boast within it. How do you approach that, and what how do you feel? How do you feel in terms of engaging with that?
Oh man, ignorance, man, ignorance. I think ignorance is a big problem, man. So I got no right there, and you within 2 seconds of talking to that person, hearing the first thing they how they speak and how they approach a conversation,
you already know.
You know that for a fact that you're probably not gonna be able to change their mind,
Yeah, but I think.
But being
sorry, before you go, I don't think that's necessarily a place of ignorance in my opinion, or at least not always. I think there are people who are aware of their toxic behavior, their toxic traits, but they refuse to unlearn it or acknowledge that it's something that they need to unlearn.
And that's the worst one. Razi, you know how it's I guess for lack of a better word, you know how annoying it is when you tell someone that what they're doing is wrong and they know it, but they refuse to it's oh, this is the way I am. It's yeah, it's the way you are, but it's the way you are is actually not the best way you can be, or that's not the way to go about things, and it becomes very annoying. And the reason why I said ignorance is because when you tell someone to do something, or the one thing how they see something isn't the way it should be. When you tell someone when you have that conversation for over multiple times, yes, it does lead to it leads to that to the ignorance, And some people, like you said, I don't think it's ignorance. Sometimes it's just the way they see life. the way things should be,
Uh-huh.
you know. For example, like if I go back to like saying like men should just be it's more like they should just be aggressive, shouldn't show your emotions, you know. And it's like sometimes I just want to say to like I'm gonna like even above, I think first off I would say I have the luxury and I have the fortunate of being raised in like two different like cultures and two different environments.
Mm-hmm.
In Burundi on one side, and I understand it that culture, but I've also been raised in America,
Mm-hmm.
where I've seen like how do I say this? I've seen a different take on in terms of my culture. Like in our culture, I would say like we say it's almost like in America, excuse me, we say ladies first, right?
Right.
But then if you look at it, like Abarundi, it's like the man first. You know what I'm saying? Like it's almost like you would want in our cultures, like if you open, when you're getting out the going to a door, that the woman should hold the door for the for the man.
Okay.
But then I grew up in a culture where like the man should hold the door for the lady.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So to those two things, when you look at them, it's like I'm fortunate to like having grown up in those two cultures, and I appreciate it and I understand both of them. But it gives me a perspective on how to look at it. Like, okay, I agree with this, but I don't agree with that. I like this, I don't like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes like it's almost like kids who are growing up here, we're also creating in a way like a subculture out of our own because we have there's two different cultures that we understand.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the times that I want to I come back to those people that don't want to change their ways or feel like their way is basically the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like I probably wouldn't understand that if I didn't have both cultures. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't have this way of to look at life on both sides. Because I didn't even like, let's say it was only like raised in Burundi. Let's say I never had the opportunity to come here and live in America. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I ask myself, what would be my definition of what toxic masculinity is? Would I
Do you even
know?
know
You
what
know
it
what I mean?
is, or if it exists?
Yeah, yeah. Or would I be thinking, is this as much as that person whom I'm like giving advice to? Like, bro, this and this is like this. Would not probably be thinking as exactly the way they're thinking.
But I think I don't think necessarily just because you grew up in the U.S. That sort of change has sort of influenced your understanding. You may not have known what toxic masculinity was if you grew up in Burundi, but I think you may have known certain aspects that or certain traits that you feel are not right, right?
Most definitely.
I'm not sure if you had a chance to listen to Shadia and Arus's podcast. I think it was Arus who was saying how uh, you, as a man, when you begin to sort of exemplify or hold, some feminine traits, you there comes a point where you're sort of like you're being shamed for it. And that creates shame within yourself as well, to where you start sort of like doubting and being, self-conscious
I've
and yeah, like, not confident in yourself. And I think within that, regardless of what culture you're growing in, and I'm saying this because this happened to me too. Like I have five sisters, and I literally grew up spending more time with my sisters than I do with my brothers, to be honest. And as a young kid, there was a point where like literally all the boys on my block, they made fun of me for hanging out with the girls, or
Right.
for not playing soccer. And it came to a point where like I would go to play soccer because I want to please the guys in my community. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I
Right.
think it doesn't have to be that the cultural exposure, but the self-realization that happens within somebody. So yeah, I don't, if you grew up in Burundi, I think you would have known which traits are toxic or not. It's just,
Well, of course.
yeah.
Yeah, I just meant that that it has given me like a look on both sides in terms of like how they view toxic masculinity. You know, I didn't mean to say in terms of like that I might not know what it is, because I think, like you say, you most definitely are gonna do that. But I do agree with you on the self realization and
Uh-huh.
on the self like criticism, because like sometimes like, you know, as a guy and literally like having like first experience that firsthand, like you'll question yourself from the things that you do sometimes. Like, if I do this, maybe like these people or like the guys are gonna get off my back because they feel like I'm, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm being too much like having feminine traits. But it's like those feminine traits that you are, you know, I guess the saying, you know, you are having,
Uh-huh.
they don't realize how, you know, important that, you know, they are. They need those traits as well. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you know what they say sometimes when you go, or when you go against a crowd, you know, most of the times you know, you're gonna even think yourself as being wrong, but you don't realize, you know, what you're doing. You know, you're
Uh-huh.
actually doing the things. So I've actually been there, though. I'm not gonna
Mm-hmm.
lie. Yeah,
And I think that's where
you know,
maturity comes in. You know, being
of
mature
course.
in that self-realization and standing true to
Right.
yourself over time.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
This is one thing that I appreciate that I've seen, and to say that I can say towards women. I know if any guys watching this, they're probably gonna be like, "That's not, so not true." But the one thing that I've realized is this, right? And we say this a lot, but people don't know how true it is. Like,
mhm,
yes, women do mature faster than men. That is true. I've had conversations with women, with girls,
mhm,
that are so eye opening, and are so, you know, so intelligent that I knew for a fact that I probably couldn't have, you know, with guy friends. Because like when you sometimes when you speak to a woman, you know, even you know, they're gonna think before they answer. You know what I mean?
mhm,
And those conversations, you might have that same conversation with a guy, and it's just not gonna go how you think it's gonna go. It's gonna be more childish,
uh-huh,
even at this age. You know what I mean? But that's because like women have sometimes they have a better understanding of certain things from
mhm,
what I've seen than boys do. You know what I mean?
mhm,
Like someone right now, a guy, there could be a guy watching this right now, us talking, but like, what in the world are they talking about? You know what I mean? They don't see the importance of it. I'm not gonna lie, someone is gonna be like that, and that's like I've
mhm,
seen that with women, and I've had more meaningful conversations with women than I have with guys.
mhm. Naomi is saying that it's just intellectual maturity, not a gender trait. But it's
True, most definitely.
uh-huh. Yeah. Arus was hoping you could speak a little bit more to what I was just talking about, the shame aspect,
Hmm.
sort of like being shamed and then beginning to feel shame within yourself and starting to doubt yourself.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I can speak on that.
Yeah.
Um, I'll give an example. Okay, me myself, like I do attract a lot of female friends. I would say that I've known that about myself, right? And what's an example I can give? I've been in a place where I guess, and also me, I'm known for like, you know, talking long time and just like, you know, advising and sitting with people. I've known for like where one time it was we were at a wedding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was, you know, when you're somewhere, sometimes you just create little groups and people are talking and people, you know, just having conversation and dialogue, and there was, you know, there was a table of guys who were all just talking about soccer and all those things. And I love soccer, of course, as you can see.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another table, there was just women sitting there and girls my age. So, I mean, of course, you know, and I heard what they were talking about. So I went in and joined the conversation.
Uh-huh.
And for me, it was nothing else that had nothing to do with whether they were female or they were male. It was just like, I love the conversation that we're having.
Mm-hmm.
And I strayed towards that conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I went and we sat and we were talking and we were, you know, just laughing and the conversation got very, you know, very good. So I remember getting up. I was like, all right, I'm gonna go over there and say hi to those guys. I remember getting up and
Uh-huh.
I went to what the guys were sitting. I'm like, what's up, guys? How's it going?
Uh-huh.
Right away, I was like, I got ridiculed. Like, bro, what are you doing here, man? You over there talking to the girls, you know? Like, what do you need us for? You know, they're there. They're talking. I don't know why you're here talking to us. Like, you know, you a ladies man or whatever. Like, you act like a girl. You're doing this. You over there. I'm like, I act like a girl. I'm doing this. What do you mean? Like, I don't understand. I was just having a common decency conversation with, you know,
Mm-hmm.
people, you know, but I got ridiculed and I got like literally put on the spot. Like, you sure you a dude, man? Like, you sure you just don't like to be with just women? You sure you're not gay, whatever? Cause you always seem to be sitting with women and stuff like that. And I'm like, what? Like, you calling me gay because I'm having a conversation with, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then like it made me go back to like where I was like, man, maybe I should just just stop hanging out with women and just hang out more with just guys. Because if that's the way guys are starting to think of me, then I guess you know what I mean.
Yeah. So
But I got to a point where like I had to find myself and be like, okay, I'm a cool person. I'm having a dope conversation with people. I'm not gonna change that just to please to please you. If you think of me a certain way, then by all means go ahead and have that thought of me.
mhm.
But I'm not gonna say that it didn't hurt me to think that peers who are who happen to be guys as well were thinking of me that way. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it was something that it was a conversation that I had to have within myself, to be comfortable enough to say, if that's what you think I'm doing, if that's how you think I am, then so be it. That's your opinion of me. I like who I am and I like what I present, so I'm cool.
Right. And
Yeah.
good. And again, that's standing true to yourself again.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to point out what Shadia here said, that girls are raised with a lot more expectations around emotional intelligence so that they can perform better under the patriarchy. Um, your take.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I cannot disagree with what she just said. 100% true.
Hmm.
I think a lot of times girls are raised to compete, like to always be ready, like to compete against men like 10 times harder because they know they have it that rough.
Hmm.
Like I remember I read there was this quote that said like no one has to work harder than a black woman, especially in American society. A black woman has to work, just the fact that she's black and she's a woman, she has to work 10 times harder than
Hmm.
her other female counterparts and also every other male there is.
Hmm.
And just women in general, to not even generalize to just one race. Women, it's almost like, okay, you know how us young boys nowadays in America, we're being taught like when a police approaches you, you should talk like this, you should act like this. I think the same way is done to females.
Right.
They're taught like in this society that we live in, you as a woman, if you want to be successful, you gotta move this way. You have to treat yourself this way because you're always gonna have this. Not only the fact that you're this race, but the fact that you're a woman in general, you're gonna have to try 10 times harder than your male counterparts.
Right.
So yes, emotionally, I think women are raised and kind of taught that at an earlier age than us men,
Mhm.
so to speak.
Yeah.
So I
So
definitely agree with that. Yeah.
I think a lot of people in the comments are sort of concurring to that. The whole idea that men automatically are taught um, to keep the status quo. And I want to say that of the
Mm-hmm.
patriarchy, whereas
Yeah.
women immediately, so, they come within a society where they're already so far behind, and so in that way they have to catch up much faster, um,
Exactly.
than men. And I think Akundwanayo is saying, the whole idea that men um, are given leeway to have to not have to mature as fast. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. Well,
And
man.
that's why men get so that's why they get so egotistical and so prideful. Like if you're a man, like especially when you see a woman get a job better than a woman, yeah, like you'll see some men exactly. It goes back again to like when they have this toxic masculinity thing. You see a woman be successful in a certain thing that say like they're your boss, and you be like, oh, how can a woman be ahead of me?
Hmm.
And you get egotistical and prideful about it to where you're hurt
Right.
because you expect to have those things because you're a man. You know what I'm saying? But it's like you don't know the fact that she had to work 10 times as hard as you ever had
Hmm.
to get exactly to what she is, you know? But when you yourself, even when you discipline yourself and you also just sometimes not everybody, we don't have sometimes we don't have someone to teach us whether this is how you should act and whatever. But when you discipline yourself and you actually see these things happen in society, you get to a point where you should be appreciating a woman for being in that position,
Hmm.
you know. But not everybody gets a chance to grow up and have that kind of look on life,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I think.
So
Mhm. Yeah, I think a good way to really get to understand that is the whole idea of like race in the U.S. You know,